The massive chamber was silent. Ji-won stood at the center of the floor, her hands trembling slightly. Around her, hundreds of alien beings sat in circular rows that reached up toward the distant ceiling. Some had scales, others had fur, and many looked like nothing she had ever imagined. They were all staring at her. She had practiced her speech for months. Every word was perfect. Every argument was strong. Earth deserved a seat on the Galactic Council. Humanity had so much to offer. Honored members of the Council, Ji-won began, her voice echoing through the chamber. I come before you representing Earth and all of humanity. We are a young species, yes, but we are ready to join the galactic community. She talked about human achievements. She explained how humans had ended their wars and united under one government. She described the art, music, and science that made Earth special. She showed images of cities, forests, and oceans. She spoke of humanity's desire for peace and friendship with other species. For 30 minutes, Ji-won poured her heart into the speech. Behind her, Hanul and the rest of the human delegation watched nervously. This was their moment. 30 years of trying to join the council had led to this day. When Ji-won finished, she bowed respectfully and stepped back. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. Then Chancellor Vexus, a being made of living crystal, raised one gleaming hand. Thank you, Ambassador Ji-won, the Chancellor said, his voice like chiming bells. The council will now deliberate. Please wait outside. Ji-won and her team filed out of the chamber. They waited in a small room with white walls and no windows. Minutes felt like hours. Hanul tried to smile encouragingly, but Ji-won could see the worry in his eyes. You did perfectly, Hanul said softly. They have to accept us. Ji-won wanted to believe him. She had dedicated her entire career to this moment. Since she was a child, she had dreamed of humanity joining the stars, working alongside alien civilizations, learning and growing together. Finally, a chime sounded. They were called back into the chamber. Chancellor Vexus stood at his platform looking down at the human delegation. His crystal face showed no emotion. The council has voted. The decision is final. Ji-won held her breath. 689 members voted against Earth's admission. 127 voted in favor. 31 abstained. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Council. The words hit Ji-won like a physical blow. She felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Denied after everything, but why? Ji-won heard herself ask. What did we do wrong? Tell us what we need to change. A reptilian creature stood up. His name was Thrain, and Ji-won recognized him as one of the council's most powerful members. He looked at her with cold yellow eyes. Your technology is insufficient, Thrain said. Your culture is unstable. And frankly, your species shows concerning levels of biological aggression. You are not ready for the responsibility of council membership. That's not fair, Ji-won protested. We've been peaceful for over 50 years. We've proven ourselves. Just give us specific requirements and we'll meet them. Chancellor Vexus raised his hand for silence. The decision is made. Humanity may submit a new application in 500 standard years. This session is concluded. 500 years. Ji-won wanted to scream. 500 years was longer than human spaceflight had existed. It was a death sentence for humanity's dreams. Hanul gently took her arm and guided her out of the chamber. The rest of the delegation followed in stunned silence. They walked through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Prime, the massive space station where the council met. Aliens of every shape and size moved past them, barely noticing the defeated humans. Back in her quarters, Ji-won sat on the edge of her bed and stared at nothing. Her entire career had been building toward this moment, and it had all crumbled to dust. It wasn't about qualifications, Hanul said quietly. He stood by the window looking out at the stars. They're afraid of us. Afraid? Ji-won looked up. Why would they be afraid of us? We're just one small planet. Think about it, Hanul said. 200 years ago, we were still using oil and coal. Now we have fusion reactors and faster-than-light ships. We went from zero to interstellar in less time than most species spend developing basic electricity. That scares them. Ji-won wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Maybe he was right. Maybe the council didn't reject humanity because humans were too primitive. Maybe they rejected humanity because humans were advancing too quickly. That night, as Ji-won lay in bed trying to sleep, her communication device blinked. A message had arrived. It was anonymous, routed through so many encrypted channels that tracing it would be impossible. The message was short. The council doesn't fear what you are. They fear what you could become. Jiwon read it 3 times. Someone on the council or someone close to them had sent this warning. But why and what did it mean? The next morning, the human delegation boarded their ship and left Nexus Prime. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Jiwon spent most of that time in her cabin, writing her report and trying to understand what had gone wrong. When they arrived on Earth, protests were already happening. People filled the streets of major cities, angry about the rejection. Some demanded that Earth cut all contact with the Galactic Council. Others called for military buildup. Everyone was hurt and confused. President Minji called an emergency meeting. In a secure room deep under the government complex, Earth's leaders gathered to decide humanity's response. Jiwon presented her report explaining every detail of the rejection. General Doyun, the head of Earth's military forces, slammed his hand on the table. I warned you this would happen. The Council doesn't want partners. They want subjects. We need to build up our defenses now, before they decide we're a threat that needs to be eliminated. We can't give up on diplomacy, Jiwon argued. Starting an arms race will only make things worse. President Minji raised her hand for silence. Both of you are partially right. We need to protect ourselves, but we also need to understand what we're dealing with. General Doyun, you've been saying for years that we need better intelligence about the Council. Now's your chance. The general leaned forward. What do you have in mind? The Council rejected our diplomat, President Minji said. But there's a provision in their rules. They have to allow us to send one observer, someone who can watch their sessions and report back. They think it's an insult making us watch without participating. But we can use it. Jiwon felt a chill run down her spine. You want to send a spy? Not a spy, General Doyun said with a slight smile. An observer. Someone trained to see what others miss. Someone who can survive in hostile territory and gather intelligence. You want to send a soldier, Jiwon said. I want to send the right person for the job, the general replied. And I know exactly who that should be. Jaehyun stood at attention in General Doyun's office. Through the wide window behind the general's desk, he could see the lights of the city spreading out into the distance. Earth looked peaceful from up here, but Jaehyun knew that peace was fragile. Captain Jaehyun, the general said, studying a file on his desk. Age 34. 15 years of military service. Expert in special operations, languages, and tactical analysis. You've served in 3 major conflicts and received 17 commendations. Your psychological profile says you're adaptable, intelligent, and capable of independent thinking. Jaehyun said nothing. When generals called you to their office and started reading your file, it usually meant something difficult was coming. General Doyun looked up. I have a mission for you, Captain. It's voluntary, but it's also the most important assignment of your career, possibly the most important assignment any human has ever received. I'm listening, sir, Jaehyun said. The general activated a holographic display. It showed Nexus Prime, the massive space station at the center of the galaxy. The Galactic Council has rejected our application for membership. They've given us the right to send one observer to watch their proceedings. That observer will be you. Jaehyun studied the rotating image of the station. With respect, sir, wouldn't a diplomat be better suited for this? A diplomat would try to make friends and negotiate, General Doyun said. I need someone who can do 3 things. First, assess the military capabilities and potential threats to Earth. Second, identify species that might become our allies. Third, and most important, find out why they really rejected us. The general stood and walked to the window. The council claims we're too primitive and too aggressive. But I think they're lying. I think they're afraid of something, and I need to know what. You won't be there to fight, Captain. You'll be there to observe, learn, and survive. How long would this assignment last? Jaehyun asked. As long as necessary. Could be months. Could be years. You'll have no support structure out there. No backup. If something goes wrong, we can't help you. You'll be completely alone among aliens who already see humans as inferior. Jaehyun thought about it for only a moment. When do I leave? The general smiled slightly. That's why I chose you. Training starts tomorrow. For the next 3 months, Jaehyun trained harder than he ever had in his life. He learned the languages of the major council species. He studied their cultures, their histories, their customs. A xenolinguist named Dr. Yoonji taught him how to read alien body language and understand nonverbal communication. Remember, Dr. Yoonji told him during one session, "You're not there to impress them. You're there to understand them. Watch everything. Listen to everything. The smallest detail might be the key to survival. Jae-hyun also received experimental technology. Doctors implanted a neural translator in his brain that would help him understand alien languages in real time. They gave him biomonitors that would track his health and warn him about environmental dangers. Hidden in his body were microscopic communication devices that could send encrypted messages back to Earth. The day before his departure, Jae-hyun visited his family. His mother cried and held him tightly. His father, a former soldier himself, simply nodded with understanding. His younger sister gave him a small stone she had found on a beach years ago. "For luck," she said, "and to remember home." Jae-hyun slipped the stone into his pocket. He didn't tell them he might be gone for years. He didn't tell them how dangerous this mission was. He just hugged them and promised to come back. The journey to Nexus Prime took 2 weeks. Jae-hyun traveled on a civilian transport ship, sharing space with traders and tourists from various worlds. He kept to himself, watching and learning. The other passengers barely noticed the quiet human in the corner. When the ship finally arrived at Nexus Prime, Jae-hyun pressed his face to the viewport and stared. The station was enormous. It looked like a small city floating in space, with lights twinkling across its surface like stars. Ships of every size and shape moved in carefully controlled patterns around it. After docking, Jae-hyun went through processing. An automated system scanned him from head to toe, checking for weapons, diseases, and unauthorized technology. A bored alien clerk gave him temporary identification and directions to the observer housing sector. His assigned quarters were small and plain. A narrow bed, a desk, a small bathroom. The walls were gray metal, and there was no window. Jae-hyun set down his single bag and looked around. This would be home for a very long time. The next morning, he attended his first council session. The observer gallery was high above the main chamber floor. Jae-hyun stood with about 50 other beings, all representatives of non-member species. Most of them looked as uncomfortable as he felt. Below, the council members sat in their designated sections. Jae-hyun recognized some species from his training. The crystalline beings were the Vex. The reptilian creatures were the Thrain. There were so many others, shapes and forms he had never imagined. The session began with formal procedures. Chancellor Vexus called the meeting to order. They discussed trade agreements, mining rights on distant asteroids, and disputes between member worlds. It was all very civilized and boring. But Jae-hyun noticed things. He noticed which species spoke frequently, and which remained silent. He noticed that certain council members would look at each other before voting, as if coordinating their responses. He noticed that whenever a controversial topic came up, the ancient species like the Vex and Thrain always controlled the outcome. He also noticed that several council members kept glancing up at the observer gallery. Specifically, they kept looking at him. The human was clearly an object of curiosity. After the session ended, Jae-hyun made his way back toward his quarters. A voice called out behind him, "Human, stop!" Jae-hyun turned. Thrain, the reptilian council member, approached him. The alien was taller than Jae-hyun by a full head, with scales that gleamed like polished metal. His yellow eyes studied Jae-hyun with obvious contempt. "So," Thrain said, his voice a hissing whisper, "Earth sends a soldier. How predictable. Your kind cannot help but resort to violence, even in diplomacy." Jae-hyun kept his expression neutral. Every instinct told him to respond to the insult. But he remembered Dr. Yoonji's training. Watch, listen, learn. "I'm here to observe and learn," Jae-hyun said calmly. "That's not violence. That's patience." Something flickered in Thrain's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. He had expected anger or aggression. The measured response seemed to catch him off guard. "Observe all you wish," Thrain said after a moment. "But remember your place, human. Observers who cause trouble have a way of disappearing. This station is very large and accidents happen." The alien turned and walked away, his tail sweeping behind him. Jae-hyun watched him go, filing the threat away in his mind. Thrain had just told him something important. The council wasn't just dismissive of humanity. They were actively hostile. Back in his quarters, Jae-hyun composed his first report to Earth. He described the council session, the power dynamics he had observed, and Thrain's warning. He encrypted the message and sent it through his hidden transmitter. Then he sat on his narrow bed and pulled out the small stone his sister had given him. He held it in his palm, feeling its smooth surface. It was just a rock from a beach on Earth, but right now it was his only connection to home. Jae-hyun had been in dangerous situations before. He had fought in wars, survived ambushes, and operated behind enemy lines. But this was different. He wasn't fighting an enemy he could see. He was trying to understand a system designed to keep humanity powerless. Over the next few weeks, Jae-hyun established a routine. He attended every council session, taking careful mental notes. He explored the station, learning its layout and finding the places where different species gathered. He ate in the common dining areas, listening to conversations and picking up gossip. Most importantly, he began to understand that Nexus Prime was not just a government center. It was a small universe of its own, with millions of residents from hundreds of worlds. There were diplomats and bureaucrats, yes, but also merchants, workers, families, and criminals. Where there were people, there were always secrets. And Jae-hyun was very good at finding secrets. 3 months had passed since Jae-hyun arrived at Nexus Prime. He had learned to navigate the station's complex maze of corridors and sectors. He knew which areas were safe and which were dangerous. He knew where to find information and where to avoid attention. One evening, as he walked through the lower commercial sector, someone fell into step beside him. Jae-hyun's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon, but he stopped himself. The figure next to him was human. "Relax, soldier," the man said with a tired smile. "I'm not a threat. Name's Suho. I've been watching you since you arrived." Jae-hyun studied him. Suho looked to be in his 40s with long hair tied back and wearing clothes that mixed human and alien styles. His eyes showed the weariness of someone who had seen too much. "You've been here a while," Jae-hyun observed. 8 years, Suho confirmed. "I came as a scientist, trying to learn from the Council's technology. Stayed because going home felt pointless. Earth keeps trying to join a club that will never accept us." They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Suho stopped at the entrance to a dimly lit bar. Strange music drifted out from inside. "Come on," Suho said. "There are people you need to meet." Inside, the bar was crowded with beings from dozens of species. Jae-hyun recognized some from the observer gallery. These were representatives of rejected worlds, merchants who couldn't get proper trading licenses, and others who existed on the edges of galactic society. Suho led him to a back corner where a strange shimmer of light hovered above an empty chair. As Jae-hyun watched, the light shifted and formed patterns that almost looked like a face. "This is the Whisper," Suho said. "One of the Lumas. They're made of pure energy and can move through electronic systems." The light pulsed, and a voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, Jae-hyun of Earth. We have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" Jae-hyun asked, sitting down carefully. "Why?" "Because you asked the right questions," the Whisper said. "You want to know why humanity was rejected? The answer is simple. The Council fears you." "Everyone keeps saying that," Jae-hyun said. "But we're just one planet. Why would they fear us?" The Whisper's light dimmed and brightened as if thinking. "The Council has existed for over 50,000 years. In all that time, it has been controlled by the same ancient species. They maintain power by keeping others weak. Any species that shows rapid progress is seen as a threat. And humanity is progressing rapidly," Jae-hyun said, understanding. "Faster than any species in Council history," the Whisper confirmed. 200 years from Industrial Revolution to interstellar travel. The ancient species took tens of thousands of years to reach that level. They see your potential and want to suppress it before you become unstoppable. Jae-hyun leaned forward. "What happens to species the Council rejects?" Suho answered this time, his voice bitter. "Some give up and stagnate. They stop advancing, hoping the Council will eventually accept them. Others keep trying and mysteriously encounter problems. Colony ships that vanish, plague outbreaks, economic collapses. Always with plausible explanations, never with proof of interference." "You're saying the Council actively sabotages rejected species?" Jae-hyun asked. "I'm saying convenient accidents happen to inconvenient species," Suho replied. "Prove it, though. That's the hard part." Over the following weeks, Jae-hyun became a regular at the bar. He met other observers and learned their stories. The pattern was clear. Every rejected species had shown either rapid advancement or innovative thinking that threatened the established order. The Kalor had developed new propulsion technology. The Vrin had created advanced artificial intelligence. The Teltec had discovered a revolutionary energy source. All had been rejected. All had later suffered mysterious setbacks. Jae-hyun compiled detailed reports and sent them to Earth. General Doyen's responses became increasingly urgent. If the pattern held, Earth would eventually face similar problems. One day, as Jae-hyun was leaving a council session, he met someone new. She was young, probably mid-20s, with grease stains on her uniform and a toolkit hanging from her belt. "You're the new human observer," she said, grinning. "I'm Seojin, maintenance engineer. Been working on this station for 2 years." Unlike Suho's cynicism, Seojin radiated optimism. She loved her work and believed humanity would eventually find its place among the stars. But she also had access to parts of the station most people never saw. "Come on," Seojin said one day. "I want to show you something." She led him through maintenance tunnels that wound behind the station's gleaming public facades. They emerged in an abandoned sector, filled with old equipment and forgotten storage rooms. "This station is over 20,000 years old," Seojin explained. "Parts of it have been sealed off and abandoned. But the old systems still work if you know how to access them." She activated an ancient terminal. Dusty holographic displays flickered to life, showing records from thousands of years ago. "Look at this," Seojin said, pulling up old council files. "The council used to be different. It used to welcome new members and encourage innovation, but about 15,000 years ago something changed." Jae-hyun studied the records. Seojin was right. Ancient records showed a vibrant, growing federation. But gradually the council had become more restrictive, more controlled, more fearful of change. "What happened?" he asked. "I don't know," Seojin admitted. "But I think the old species got scared. They had power and didn't want to share it, so they started making rules that kept new members out." 2 weeks later, something happened that changed everything. During a council session, an observer from the Kalor species stood up in the gallery. He shouted something in his own language, demanding to be heard. Security forces responded immediately. They swarmed the gallery with weapons drawn. The Kalor observer didn't back down. He kept shouting, trying to address the council floor, then they shot him. Jae-hyun watched in horror as the Kalor fell. 3 other Kalor observers rushed to help their companion. Security shot them too. In less than 30 seconds, 4 beings lay dead in the gallery. The council chamber fell silent. Then Chancellor Vexus calmly called for the bodies to be removed and the session to continue. No one mentioned what had just happened. They simply moved on to the next item on the agenda. Jae-hyun left the chamber feeling sick. This wasn't a government. It was a tyranny. The civilized facade hid something dark and ruthless. That night he met with Suho, Seojin, and the Whisper. They sat in the back room of the bar, speaking in hushed voices. "Did you see what they did?" Jae-hyun asked. "They murdered those observers in cold blood." "The council doesn't tolerate challenges," the Whisper said. "They maintain control through fear." "Someone needs to expose what they're doing," Seojin said angrily. "The whole galaxy should know the truth." "Expose them how?" Suho asked. "We're nobodies. Observers, engineers, energy beings. We have no power here." Jae-hyun looked at each of them. An idea was forming in his mind. It was dangerous. It was probably impossible, but it might be the only chance to change things. "What if we're not alone?" he said slowly. "What if there are others who feel the same way? Other rejected species? Other victims of the council's corruption?" "There are," the Whisper confirmed. "Many others, but they are scattered and afraid." "Then we bring them together," Jae-hyun said. "We build a coalition, and when we're strong enough, we expose the council for what they really are." Seojin smiled. "Now you're thinking like a human. Not accepting what is, but fighting for what should be." Suho shook his head, but he was smiling too. "You're all crazy. But I'm in. Someone needs to stand up to these tyrants." The Whisper pulsed with light. "I will help connect you with others. The Lumas have access to many networks. We can reach beings the council thinks are isolated." Jae-hyun felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He had been sent to observe and gather intelligence. But sometimes observation wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to act. "All right," he said. "Let's build an alliance." Building the coalition took 4 months of careful, dangerous work. Jae-hyun met with representatives from 12 rejected species. They gathered in secret locations throughout Nexus Prime, always watching for council security. Each species had its own story of rejection and loss. The Kalor mourned their dead observers and wanted justice. The Vryn had lost 3 colony worlds to mysterious plagues. The Telthek discovered that council members had stolen their energy technology, and claimed it as their own invention. But having stories wasn't enough. They needed proof, hard evidence that would be impossible for the council to deny or ignore. Seojin proved invaluable. Her maintenance access let her reach areas of the station that were supposed to be restricted. She found old data archives, forgotten storage systems, and security logs that had been improperly deleted. One night, she and Jaehyun broke into a sealed archive room in the oldest part of the station. Dust covered everything. The air smelled ancient and stale. "These terminals are over 5,000 years old," Seojin whispered, working at a control panel. But the council never properly erased their data. They just locked the doors and forgot. The terminal flickered to life. Jaehyun began searching through files. What he found made his blood run cold. Orders for assassinations, plans to sabotage colony ships, communications coordinating economic attacks, files detailing biological weapons deployed against rejected species. Everything was there, documented in the council's own records. But the most disturbing discovery was a current file. It detailed weapons platforms positioned near Earth's solar system. The file included authorization for strike protocols if humanity continued to advance too quickly. "They're planning to attack Earth," Jaehyun said quietly. "If we don't stop them, humanity is next on their list." Seojin copied everything onto encrypted storage devices. They had their evidence. Now they needed a way to reveal it to the galaxy. Back at the bar, the coalition gathered for an emergency meeting. Jaehyun laid out what they had found. Faces around the table showed anger, fear, and determination. "We have evidence," a Vrin representative said. "But how do we show it to anyone? The council controls all official communication channels. We need to present it during a council session," Jaehyun said. "In front of everyone. If we broadcast it across the galaxy at the same time, they can't suppress it." "Observers cannot speak during sessions," Suho reminded him. "They'll arrest anyone who tries." "You saw what happened to the Kaelor." Jaehyun had been researching this problem. He pulled up an ancient council law on his datapad. "There's a provision called the right of challenge," he explained. "Any being can address the council if they formally accuse them of crimes against sapient life. It hasn't been invoked in over 3,000 years, but it's still valid law." The whisper's light pulsed thoughtfully. "They will not let you leave alive after such an accusation. You understand this?" "I understand," Jaehyun said. "But if we can broadcast the evidence at the same time, it won't matter what happens to me. The truth will be out there." Seojin grabbed his hand. "We'll get you out. I promise. We didn't come this far to lose you now." They spent the next 3 weeks preparing. The Whisper created data packets that would simultaneously broadcast to every member world in the galaxy. Seojin designed a way to hijack the council's own communication systems. Suho and the others gathered more evidence and compiled everything into an undeniable presentation. Jaehyun practiced his speech. He knew he would only have 1 hour. 1 hour to present thousands of years of crimes. 1 hour to change the galaxy. The night before the planned challenge, Jaehyun couldn't sleep. He sat in his quarters recording messages to his family. He told them he loved them. He told them he was proud to be human. He told them that what he was about to do might help ensure humanity's future. He pulled out the small stone his sister had given him. It felt warm in his palm, like it held a piece of earth inside it. The next day, Jaehyun attended the council session as usual. He stood in the observer gallery with the others. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. This was it. The session proceeded normally for the first hour. Trade disputes, territory negotiations, the usual political theater. Then, during a discussion about expanding into new sectors, Jaehyun took a deep breath. He stepped forward to the gallery railing and raised his voice. "I invoke the right of challenge." The chamber fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to stare at him. Chancellor Vexus stood slowly from his seat. "What did you say?" the Chancellor asked, his crystal voice sharp. "I invoke the right of challenge," Jaehyun repeated, louder this time. "I formally accuse this council of crimes against sapient life. I demand the right to present evidence." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Council members shouted in dozens of languages. Security forces began moving toward the gallery. But Chancellor Vexus raised his hand. "The right of challenge is ancient law," he said coldly. "If I deny it, I break the very foundation of council authority." "Very well, human. You have 1 hour to present your accusation. Guards, bring him to the floor." Jaehyun descended from the gallery, surrounded by armed guards. His legs felt weak, but he kept walking. He was the first human to ever stand on the council chamber floor. A projection system activated, linked to his neural implant. Jae-hyun began his presentation. He showed the assassinations, the sabotaged colonies, the stolen technology, the biological weapons, the weapons platforms aimed at rejected species' homeworlds. Every piece of evidence was displayed for the entire chamber to see. Communications between council members plotting murders, orders signed by high-ranking officials, satellite imagery showing weapon installations. The data was overwhelming and undeniable. As Jae-hyun spoke, the whisper activated the broadcast system. The evidence began transmitting to every member world across the galaxy. Billions of beings were witnessing the Council's corruption in real time. For thousands of years you have claimed to represent peace and justice, Jae-hyun said, his voice echoing through the chamber. But you are nothing but tyrants. You murdered anyone who threatened your power. You sabotaged worlds that dared to innovate. You are not protectors of galactic civilization. You are its greatest threat. Thrain stood up, his reptilian face twisted with rage. This is treason. Lies and propaganda. These are your own records, Jae-hyun shot back. Your own communications. Your own orders. The evidence speaks for itself. Chancellor Vexus's crystal face showed no emotion, but his voice was ice. Guards, arrest this human immediately. Security forces rushed forward, weapons aimed at Jae-hyun. But before they could reach him, something unexpected happened. Several council members stood up in protest. Wait, a young council member shouted. We demand answers. Is this evidence real? More members joined in. The chamber erupted into argument. Some defended the old ways, claiming the actions were necessary for stability. Others demanded immediate investigation. The unified council was fracturing before everyone's eyes. Jae-hyun had accomplished his goal. The truth was out. The galaxy knew what the council had done. Even if they killed him now, it wouldn't matter. The seed of change had been planted. Guards grabbed Jae-hyun's arms and dragged him away. As they pulled him from the chamber, he caught Seo-jin's eye in the gallery. She nodded once. The escape plan was ready. They threw him into a detention cell deep in the station. The walls were solid metal, and the door had no handle on the inside. Jae-hyun sat on the hard bench and waited. He had changed the galaxy. Now he just needed to survive long enough to see what came next. Jae-hyun spent 3 days in the detention cell. Guards brought him food and water but said nothing. He could hear distant sounds through the walls, sounds that suggested chaos on the station, protests, arguments. The evidence he had revealed was tearing the council apart. On the third night, the lights in his cell suddenly went out. Jae-hyun stood up, his military training kicking in. The door hissed open and a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Come on, Seo-jin whispered urgently. We don't have much time. Jae-hyun followed her into the dark corridor. Suho waited there with 2 members of the coalition, both armed with stolen security weapons. The whisper appeared as a faint glow in the shadows. The station is in chaos, Suho explained as they moved quickly through maintenance tunnels. Half the council wants you executed. The other half wants an investigation. Some species are threatening to leave the council entirely. Where are we going? Jae-hyun asked. A transport is waiting, Seo-jin said. It's filled with other freed prisoners from rejected species. We're all leaving together. They reached a docking bay where a large ship waited. Dozens of beings hurried aboard, carrying whatever possessions they could grab. These were the outcasts, the rejected, the oppressed. Now they were escaping together. Alarms began blaring as they boarded. Security forces had discovered the escape. Seo-jin ran to the pilot's cabin and began the launch sequence. The ship's engines roared to life. They're closing the docking bay doors. Someone shouted, Hold on, Seo-jin yelled back. She pushed the engines to maximum thrust. The ship shot forward, scraping under the closing doors with only meters to spare. They burst out into open space, leaving Nexus Prime behind. The whisper's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Council forces are pursuing, but several member species have refused to participate in the chase. The Council's authority is breaking down. Jae-hyun made his way to the pilot's cabin and looked at the view screen. Behind them, Nexus Prime grew smaller. Ahead lay the stars and the long journey home. You did it, Seo-jin said quietly. You actually did it. We did it, Jae-hyun corrected. All of us together. The journey to Earth took 4 weeks. During that time, news from across the galaxy continued to arrive. The evidence Jae-hyun had broadcast was causing massive upheaval. Protests erupted on dozens of council member worlds. Some species formally withdrew their membership. Others demanded sweeping reforms. A group of reform-minded species announced they were forming a new organization. They called it the Galactic Assembly, and they invited all species to join as equals. 43 species signed on immediately, including several who had left the old council. The old council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. The ancient species like Thrain and Chancellor Vexus clung to their power, but fewer and fewer species listened to their commands. When Jae-hyun's ship finally entered Earth's solar system, he felt emotion tighten his throat. Home. He was actually coming home. A military escort met them at the edge of the system. General Doyon himself was aboard the lead ship. When they docked, the general waited on the platform with a rare smile on his face. "Captain Jae-hyun," General Doyon said, saluting. "Welcome home. Earth owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "I just did my duty, sir," Jae-hyun replied, returning the salute. "You did far more than that," the general said. "You changed the galaxy. Come on. The president wants to see you." The debriefing took 3 days. Jae-hyun told them everything. The council's crimes, the coalition he had built, the evidence he had gathered, the escape from Nexus Prime. Military and civilian leaders hung on every word. President Minji thanked him personally. "You were sent to observe and assess threats. Instead, you built alliances and exposed tyranny. You've given humanity something we desperately needed: hope." 2 weeks after returning to Earth, Jae-hyun received new orders. He was promoted to colonel and offered a position on Earth's new Galactic Relations Council. But he asked for time to think about it. He spent that time with his family. His mother cooked all his favorite foods. His father listened to his stories with quiet pride. His sister showed him the beach where she had found the lucky stone, and they walked along the shore together. "You look different," his sister observed. "Older, somehow." "I've seen things I never imagined," Jae-hyun admitted. "Good and bad. The galaxy is so much bigger and more complicated than we thought." "Are you glad you went?" Jae-hyun thought about it. The danger, the loneliness, the fear, but also the friendships. The purpose, the knowledge that he had made a difference. "Yes," he said finally, "I'm glad." 6 months after Jae-hyun had challenged the council, the Galactic Assembly formally invited humanity to join as a founding member. Ambassador Ji-won, who had once faced rejection, now had the honor of accepting on behalf of Earth. The Assembly's headquarters was on a new station, built cooperatively by member species. It was smaller than Nexus Prime but felt more welcoming. Decisions were made democratically. All species had equal voices. It was what the old council should have been. Jae-hyun attended the opening ceremony as part of Earth's delegation. He stood in the gallery, but this time not as an observer without power. This time he stood as a representative of a valued member species. Seojin stood beside him. She had accepted a position as Earth's technology liaison, working with other species to share innovations freely. Suho was there too, no longer cynical but hopeful about the future. The whisper appeared as a shimmer of light near them. "You should be proud, Jae-hyun. What you started is growing into something beautiful." "What we started," Jae-hyun corrected again. "I couldn't have done any of it alone." Ambassador Ji-won stepped forward to address the assembly. She spoke about cooperation, mutual respect, and the bright future that lay ahead when species worked together as equals. The chamber erupted in applause from dozens of different species. After the ceremony, Jae-hyun stood at a viewing port, looking out at the stars. The whisper joined him. "The old council feared what humanity could become," the whisper said. "Now the galaxy is eager to discover it. What do you think humans will bring to the galactic community?" Jae-hyun smiled. "Hope, determination, the refusal to accept injustice. We've spent our whole history overcoming obstacles and adapting to challenges. We don't give up easily." "That's what they feared most," the whisper said. "Your refusal to stay in the box they tried to put you in." Seojin approached and handed Jae-hyun a data pad. "Just got word from Earth. They want to establish embassies on 15 different worlds. They want you to help select the locations." 15 embassies, Jae-hyun said, shaking his head in wonder. "A year ago we had none. We weren't even allowed to speak in the council chamber." "You changed that," Seojin said. "You proved that one person standing up for what's right can change everything." "One person with good friends," Jae-hyun corrected. He looked at Seojin, Suho, and the Whisper. We did this together, and we'll build the future together too. Later that evening, Jae-hyun returned to his quarters on the new station. They were much nicer than his old cell on Nexus Prime. He had a window that looked out at a nebula, its colors swirling like a cosmic painting. He pulled out the small stone his sister had given him. It had been in his pocket through everything. Through council sessions and secret meetings. Through his arrest and escape. Through the journey home and back to the stars again. Just a rock from an Earth beach. But it reminded him of home, of family, of the planet worth fighting for. The Galactic Council had denied humanity a seat because they feared what humans might become. They had tried to keep humanity small and powerless, but they had failed to understand one simple truth about humans. Humans didn't wait for permission to matter. They didn't accept limitations placed on them by others. When told they weren't good enough, they proved otherwise. When given an observer without power, they sent someone who understood that real power came not from authority but from truth and courage. The Council had thought sending a soldier would prove humanity's violent nature. Instead, Jae-hyun had shown that soldiers could be diplomats, that strength could serve justice, and that sometimes the greatest battles were fought not with weapons, but with words and evidence. As Jae-hyun looked out at the stars, he thought about humanity's future. The journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead. Not every species would welcome humans. Old prejudices would take time to fade. But humanity had proven it belonged among the stars, not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they refused to give up. Because they built alliances instead of fighting alone. Because they stood up against injustice even when it was dangerous. Because they adapted and learned and never stopped trying to be better. That was the human way. And now, finally, the galaxy would see what humanity could really become.